I still don't know why I avoided that issue for so long. I really don't. I guess they were so far removed from that and they were not experiencing that kind of thing. And I think I probably did, like a lot of black parents. I also protected them from the past. And I really found out that was a big mistake, that our children need to be aware of the past and to know where they're coming from. And therefore they can appreciate, you know, the freedoms they have and the fights that went into those freedoms that we have now, that we look at and we don't even have a clue. And I think sometimes that's why we have a lost generation, because people don't know their past, and so you can't appreciate something you don't know.
I feel like the community has a duty to, you know, share its history, to be upfront. When you don't acknowledge things, that allows room for people to do any and everything they want to and be justified because it's not being acknowledged. No one's saying anything.
And to me, it wasn't even that long ago. Many of the people who were a part of this are still alive today.
Right.
They're still here to tell their stories. Why isn't anybody ready to listen yet?
We're standing along the banks of the Leaf River, which drew the original settlement of Hattiesburg in 1880. After the Civil War, after slavery, plantation slavery had passed, this area was filled with huge virgin stands of pine timber. The land around here had these 200-year-old stands of trees that had never been touched. And lumbermen everywhere saw those longleaf pine trees as an opportunity. The railroads, the mills, and housing tended to be located together. Now, as the city grew, more white settlement expanded west and south. But the mill housing is really the start of a lot of the historic black neighborhoods around Hattiesburg.
Well, the neighborhoods were segregated, and they were segregated and named by what was called quarters. And the neighborhood, the community I lived in was called Arledge Quarters. There was East Jerusalem Quarters, and those were just sections of town where primarily black people lived in those. And again, there were clear lines of demarcation between black communities and white communities, and very seldom would you cross those lines. We had a saying back in those days, and that was, if you're black, get back. If you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, stick around. And that was the mantra that we lived by, and it helped us to just survive, even though it was wrong, even though it was degrading, insulting, dehumanizing, but it also meant that we survived.
Schools in Hattiesburg were strictly segregated, white only, black only facilities. In most of Mississippi, including Forest County, the school funding was significantly different for black kids as opposed to white kids.
In terms of quality, the construction, how they looked, the white schools were more modern. They had the more modern equipment.
Hand-me-down equipment of all sorts was the general rule. And until the 40s and 50s, the pay differential between white faculty and black faculty with the same qualification was different. All of that became the subject of Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, which began the slow process of desegregation, but it took a long time for the forces of desegregation to really become significant in the Deep South. When the school desegregation decision came in 1954, white leadership, 2 or 3 months later, organized a thing called the White Citizens Council that campaigned, and this is typically businessmen button-down collar, the Chamber of Commerce race branch. They campaigned around the state on resistance, build resistance to any form of racial desegregation. And so you had white leadership fueling the idea that there was some kind of catastrophe if the state desegregated.
Clyde Kennard tried to go to USM, and that confused us at the time, but we could hear all of what had happened and how they contrived to get this story together and how he was arrested. I lived within 3 blocks of William Carey College at the time, and I never once, it never entered my head to think about going to school there. So we had Carey, and we also had USM, but we just never thought about it as a possibility. And then my parents got a call, so that changed my life. Mr. Berger, who was the principal of my high school, called my parents and said that he and Dr. Noonkester from William Carey College wanted to meet with them. So they went down. The board had agreed that they would desegregate the William Carey, and they wanted to get some people who would be willing to go. They asked my parents to consider it, talk to them all about how we would be protected and watched over, that kind of thing. So my parents told them they would have to think about it, and they came home and they discussed it with me, and I was saying, no, wait. Linda and I were chosen, and I remember my parents told me that they were looking for, first of all, females, because they felt like there was no way they could send boys or young men over to integrate these schools. There was just too much going on at the time in our community, in our state, that wouldn't allow that. Then they were also looking for good students. And my mother later told me they did a background check on the parents before they even approached them. I really didn't have a lot of experiences that made me fear what could happen to me, but it was just mostly the new experience. Nobody really knew we were going. We just kind of just sneaked in there. But I think we saw, and I saw later a little article that was like maybe 3 or 4 lines that said 2 black females enrolled at William Carey. And at the same time across town with Elaine Armstrong, one of our other classmates, and Raylani Branch, man, it was all in the papers. They had to have the National Guards out, and people were spitting, and they had to walk, between, armed people to get to classes.
They knew Gwendolyn Elaine Armstrong was 12th grade, had gone to the school as a senior on senior day, college day at the university. She enrolled, she was accepted, she had an advisor. They did not know I was coming. But the NAACP had asked me if I would escort her to school. And believe it or not, we didn't have one single class together.
I did not learn for years that my father and the other neighbors, the man who lived on the corner, the man who lived down near us, that they slept with their guns, that by their beds, because they were worried about people trying to do us harm.
so many people were so afraid of what was going to happen to us. They just knew somebody was going to kill us. If we got on the bus to go, people would get up and get off the bus. Everyone would get up and go off the bus because they just knew that somebody was going to blow up the bus or shoot us, and they would get shot in the meantime.
We actually had a cross burning on campus. The Ku Klux Klan burned a cross. And so Linda and I went to campus. We didn't know what had happened. We could smell it, but they had removed all the evidence. So it was only later when we got home that we learned that a cross had been burned on campus. The FBI that came to our home after the cross burning on the campus, and they talked to my parents, and I was not in the room. I don't know why they didn't include me in there, but one of my sisters was listening to the door, and so they said, why would you want to send your child to a school like this and put her in danger? Wow. You would think they would have been supportive of the efforts.
I attended primarily segregated elementary schools, and I attended Hawkins Junior High School, which at that time was a primarily Caucasian junior high school. It was the first year that the secondary schools were integrated.
We desegregated Tim's 5 black kids. There was Algery Clark, Valisa Clark, Benton Dwight, James Hicks, and myself.
There were a lot of stereotypes that we had to deal with. I actually had a classmate asked me if she could see my tail. She thought black people had tails. And this was in 1967, and I was asked that question.
I was walking down the hallway one day and minding my own business. There were only 5 black students at this school. And one of my white classmates who just hated black people, as he walked past me, he just hauled off and spat on me as I passed him in the hallway. And he was aiming for my face, but the spittle landed on my pant leg. And I just simply went to the nearest restroom, got a paper towel, and wiped off my pant leg. His buddies were standing around, taunting and jeering, and wanted me to come back in and get into a fight with this guy. And I had to kind of reason it out in a very short amount of time. Every step I made towards that bathroom, I wanted to turn around and I had to fight that urge to turn around and just go back and clock somebody, because it was insulting, it was degrading, really dehumanizing for someone to spit on you like that. And I started thinking, if I go back and do this, the bigots in town would figure out this is how you make this an all-white school again. Provoke one of these kids, spit on him, slap him, call him the N-word, whatever, and before Friday, before the end of the week, it'd be an all-white school again, because the powers that be would have said, look, we can't let black kids and white kids go to school because all they'll do is fight. So we had a tremendous responsibility, I felt it, to not retaliate. I was mocked. I was considered less capable by some of my teachers. I was considered less intelligent by some of my classmates and my teachers.
Teachers thought, because we came from primarily segregated elementary schools, they didn't expect us to be on grade level. They didn't think we could work like the others, the white kids that were there, which was not true. We may not have had some of the exposure they had, because there's no doubt that some of the segregated schools did not have the materials that the primary white schools did. So some things we did not have exposure to. We had all the basic reading, writing, arithmetic, things like that, but no pre-algebra, no pre-geometry, things like that. So we were behind, but didn't take us any time to catch up. But the teachers didn't. Some teachers didn't think we could do it.
As it relates to high school, I don't think segregation ended with one school becoming the school. I don't think it ended, because there were still these feelings, psychological feelings, real deep down feelings of superiority and inferiority. And so it wasn't like flipping a switch. You know, you can go over here where now you're equal. Well, that wasn't the way we were treated, because we weren't treated equal. We were treated as being an intruder. In 11th grade, what the city fathers did, or the board of trustees did, was basically said that if you lived on this side of town, you went to Blair. If you lived on this side of town, the other side of town, you actually went to Rowan. So they had two high schools that to try to get rid of that racially identifiable school image that they had, where this is a white school, this is a black school. The next year, they did away with this and decided that there was only going to be one high school, and that high school was going to be the Blair Center. And Rowan would then become a 10th grade center.
We really didn't have true integration. We were brought to the schools and told we were going to do it their way. And that's what happened. And that's part of the problem. We didn't have true integration. We just came there and became part of the way they were doing things.
What had happened over the years is that whites had migrated to a certain school, and blacks migrated back to certain schools. So now we're right back. We were racially identifiable again.
The white community has never really given the school district a chance. And there was movement to Oak Grove, Petal, Magnet School, the white flight, the whole push to have alternatives. I don't see why you couldn't replicate, you couldn't have a really successful, for example, high school and be integrated. I don't why people wouldn't give it a chance. But
I see some regression because the school that I went to, when the schools merged, they were racially mixed. Now the high school, Hattiesburg High School, where I spent so many years, each year we had more and more white students to leave. And now for the most part, it's probably at least 85%, if not more, black.
Our high school is, we would say, probably 98% African American students. We feel that the community may not want to believe that we as African American students can be successful, we can be articulate, and we can do things just like other students. And so sometimes we are left in the shadows because of that.
Low test scores are associated with black kids.
Low test scores are associated with black kids. So what happens? I saw it on the segregation poster over here. What do parents do then?
White parents send their kids to private schools.
Right. So we have this self-segregation, which I saw someone write over here that said it's not just the laws anymore that's making us segregate. So in law we call that, it's called de facto and de jure segregation. So de jure segregation is like the law says that this is what has to happen, and de facto segregation is like I'm making a personal choice to segregate myself. And a lot of times, especially in the United States, it is because of we can use schools as a way to segregate ourselves. Oh, the test scores there are bad. Oh, the kids there are violent. Oh, this. And so I'm just going to segregate myself over here.
Test score thing is also something that's a self-fulfilling positive feedback cycle. Because as the test scores get lower, more and more people will pull their kids out of the school and send them to other places. And as there's less kids there, it gets less funding. And also as the scores get lower and lower, it also tends to get less funding and worse teachers.
Here in our own town, we're seen as the bad kids, but we fly to
California.
Oh my gosh,
Boston.
it's Hattiesburg High School. People
Right.
get scared to compete against us. And here in our own town, we don't even feel like we're a part of the conversation, like we matter, but we can go all these places all over the country and be looked at as like
Envy. We're envied
Yes.
when we go to other places. It's crazy.
Every race should have equal opportunities, not just black and whites. I feel like everybody should have equal opportunities, and no one race should be greater than the other. I feel like we all should be able to do the same things, to live by the same rules, to stay in the same places that we want, and just have equal opportunities among ourselves. And that we can all join as one and not be so separated and segregated amongst each other, because oftentimes it's always a competition between the black and the whites. I feel like it shouldn't be like that. I feel like if we all strive together and try to live together, that it would eliminate a lot of problems. If we all just come together and be one, the world would be a way greater place and a way safer place.
It goes back to community, just the community being able to accept everybody for who they are and seeing that everybody has the equal chance to live just as good as you do. You know, a better world to me would be to walk in Walmart and smile at a white person. For you to actually just smile genuinely, to see that I'm a human being and I'm here to get groceries just like you. You know, to actually, I don't know, I guess it's the little things.
For me as a student to feel that I can compete with everybody else, even though I'm black, even though I'm a woman, for me not to ever have to worry about my children and how they will have to react and act in this world in a certain ways, to always be on the safe side, for my grandchildren not to have to say, oh, I don't feel like I fit in here. So one day I just wish that nobody in America is the stranger, the one that's always going to be left out, the one whose opinion doesn't matter, and the one everyone has a voice.
I'm different. I'm different.
I'm different.
But diversity is a great thing.
When we can forget about our differences and only see the similarities, we can create a connection that brings us together because of difference.
However, we must always remember our past and use that to make our community better in union and lovingness. Together, if we can do that today,
All different.
then we can change the world.